So it's our privilege this morning to have Anita Radini with us. Anita is speaking to us from Italy, but Anita is a research fellow with York University, sponsored by the Wellcome Trust. We're going to really enjoy this. We always enjoy our talks, but I think this is going to be something really special. And we're very grateful to Anita, who is such a busy person, for giving so much time to us. So thank you, Anita.
So I will start saying hello to everybody, and it's a pleasure to be here talking about a place that I have loved since a child, which is Libya, and I hope that you can understand my accent. Normally when I am in Italy for some times, the accent tend to go a little bit pear shape. Okay, so basically, as you have already said, Patricia, my name is Anita Radini, and I am a well contrast research fellow at the Department of Archaeology and Physics at the University of York, and I will tell you in a minute about my research. But first of all, what I want to say is that I am going to talk about this bottle of is called Desert in a Bottle, and it's something I took from Libya, from the Libyan desert many years ago, now nearly 10, as a reference material for a project I was working on. And the title of the talk is inspired by this bottle, and you'll have to wait until the very end to understand why. So it's Desert in a Bottle, an archaeobotanist in the Central Sahara. And I have divided this talk. I try to understand how to divide it a little bit. And I have divided into domesticated crops versus wild plants. Okay, and so the first bit will be on the plants that probably we know the most from desert environment. And then I'm going to show you something that is a little bit more different from what we are used to. Is that okay? So am I going too fast? Is my voice clear?
That's fine.
Excellent. Okay, so at the moment I am working on something that is called a taste of hard work, and I work on a very particular deposit on teeth called dental calculus, which is effectively mineralized dental plaque. And what you can see here, can you see the arrow? My arrow pointing at all? Let me see. Okay, annotate.
No, we can't see your pointer.
No, but I do think I may be able to show you something here. So the dental, can you see it? Yeah, in a blue circle.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, excellent. So this is dental tartar, and basically is dental plaque that has mineralized. This deposit sits in the human mouth. And what it happens is when you inhale material or accidentally ingest it, even if, when you are eating, it entombs tiny little particles of food, of air, of pollutants that are around. So my research at the moment focuses on this deposit and its utility in understanding exposure to pollution from skeletal remains. And so although it is not in Libya, the majority of the skeletal and mummism study come from Sudan, from the Sudanese Sahara. So as you can see, even if I am a little bit away from Libya, I did not leave my beloved desert. Okay, so next slide. So my involvement with the Libyan desert, let me just, sorry, I'm getting a little bit confused here. Can you see the strip with the annotation, or am I the only one to see it? Can you see a strip?
I see Desert Migrations Project.
Excellent, okay. So basically, the involvement I have, my contact with the Libyan desert was several years ago thanks to Desert Migration Project. If you are familiar with the University of Leicester and the Department of Archaeology, you have probably have heard several times the name of Professor David Mattingly, who is someone that has absolutely loved the desert for very many years and spent his entire career studying in Libya. And basically, between 2009 and 2011, he won a major grant from the European community to study a very little known population known as the Garamansian of Libya. And in collaboration with the University of Cambridge, they also were able to explore the past 2 million years of human occupation in the Central Sahara, in the Libyan Sahara, around Germa as well. So I was the archaeobotanist for the project, and because I was working for the University of Leicester Archaeological Services, I also worked on the excavation of many human remains. So pretty much, unless specified, all the pictures that you will see here were taken by me during this project and personal visits to work on reference material. So during one of the expedition, on the right side, you can see me digging, and you can see on near my hand, you can probably slightly recognize what are the legs of skeletal remains. I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but there will be imaging of skeletons. On the left of the screen is my little desert in a bottle. And what I would like to show you already is the color of the sand from the bottom to the top. And you can see there is the very pale sand, then there is reddish and then orange. This is caused by oscillation of water through the water table, and that causes different oxidation of iron. And it is a memory that the desert have of the water table and the water that was once there. At the top of it, there are two little brown dots, and you will find out later what they are. But that too are some remains that keeps the memory of what the desert is for life that lives there. So you will see why it is so precious for me, this little bottle. Now, the area that we are going to talk it's in this white circle, maybe a little bit northern, and is an area that is one of the most remote locations in the Sahara. It's the central part of the Sahara, which means that a lot of the information we have about plants, animals, and about the past, as well as the modern flora and fauna, is still really a bit of a mystery. We know very little. Some of the information we have came from historical expedition and explorer, among which this map that I have used. I think that when we talk about the desert, especially the Sahara, the Central Sahara in particular, what we actually have in mind is its rolling dunes of sand. And in this picture, you can see a colleague of mine, Topi Savage, who is a photographer, crossing the Ubari Sand Sea with his Land Rover in a day that was very unusual for the desert because it was misty. But I have chosen this because actually, although this environment seems so harsh, there is sometimes some mist in the air, there is water in the underground, and this actually allowed some life. And you will see which one it is. So just to get an idea, the arrow point to the location of the Ubari Sand Sea, that will be the area where the picture you're going to see come from. Okay, so is everything clear so far? Yeah? Okay, now this is in French, but I will translate it for you. As a person interested in desert and in general in plants, I have absolutely loved working in the Sahara because the picture we have in mind are palms and sand and dunes and rolling these desert storms that we always think of, and desiccated lakes. And we think about it as an environment where there is very little life. In reality, for its location in North Africa, the Sahara has a memory of very dramatic climatic change that have been occurred repeatedly for several 100,000 years. One of the last one, around 40,000 years, built a lot of water. Because of its location, it's between the Mediterranean at the north of the Sahara and what we call a more tropical Africa at its south. The vegetation is beautiful for a botanist because these, although there aren't very many species, the species have a memory of these shiftings of tropical and Mediterranean elements that have followed the rain that was moving north or south, following the changes in the climate and in the environmental circulation of rain and winds that have characterized the area. What we will do first, we are going to look at the oasis. But in general, I wanted to share some of the pictures. Sometimes you go on for hours and hours without seeing any form of plants or life. And even if there are no plants, I think it's one of the most extraordinary places in the planet. To me, it makes me thinking of an environment very primordial. It almost feels like Mars at times. But here and there in the desert, you can see here in the right, on the right picture, you do see evidence of some form of human occupation, because what is happening is this, these deserts sands are not actually static. They move, they change. It's an environment that is constantly evolving. And every now and again, where there is a little bit of water that can be accessed in the underground from the water table, some form of life pop-ups and people exploit it. And then as it was possible, the dunes come along and buried it. So it changes all the time. However, and you can see here a good example, here and there, you can see these changes that have occurred in the past few years, decades. And here what you can see is that where potentially there was a form of oasis and some water close to the surface that palm could use. But clearly, in this case, you can see that the dunes are actually beginning to swallow the remaining palms. In some area in the Ubari landscape, there are still lakes like this one. And you have clouds. I have seen them very often actually in the desert. And these are extraordinary environment because that presence of water is important for the local vegetation. You can see it's mainly form of palms, but it also allows a little bit of shade to allow the insects, small mammals, and sometimes larger mammals, and even people to exploit the water resource and to be able to live even if for short period of times. This is fundamental for the plants and the people and the animals, because in reality, the scattering of these very small dots of water allowed people to cross the Sahara, north, south, and vice versa, and east, west. So no, it doesn't matter how small they are. They allowed bridges, we call them, and they're bridges for plants, people, and animals. And they are obviously characterized from the palms, but there is also these lovely plants. The one you can see here is called Phragmites australis, and is scattered everywhere where there is water around the world, basically. But it is a very important plant. And when you go around and see people that live even temporarily in the lakes, much of the material culture is made either with palm leaves or with the leaves of this plant, in terms of mats, baskets, but also roofing material, and very often is also used as fuel. Okay, so this is another. The water cannot be drunk by us as it looks, as it is here, because it's actually quite, the color is due to the quantity of salt and the microorganism and debris that comes from the oasis itself. And in fact, if a person who is not used to that environment baths in the oasis, you can have problem to your skin. It's not good for us, but it gives you an idea. And here, what you can see is the problem that is happening again in the various oases in the desert, and is this, the sand is actually beginning to swallow them. Okay, the next picture shows you the importance of the date palm. So what you see here is that the date palm has been managed. So every year, people tend to remove the crown of leaves that from the previous year, and these are used as roofing material to make object, basket, mats, but also as fuel, because in the desert there isn't much wood. So this is a source of fuel. as the palm grows, the dates go farther and farther and farther up and away from the ground. So sometimes it's a common sign to see scales. No scales, sorry, staircases going up, and people have developed quite some good skill in climbing up and downs. And it's quite interesting. But what you can also see here is that the green that was there before is going away. So it's a trend in the Oasis of Central Sahara. One of the features that I absolutely like of these lakes in the Warderitas is that there are markets, little markets, banquets of their Tuareg that use this lake to cross the desert and sell their goodies. And here you can see a very good example of how each part of this sort of stand is made with palms. As an archaeologist, I like to think that this activity of selling goodies, of being able to live there for some period of times, was a common sight, much more common in the past, where this area where there was a bit of water and palm were way more common than they are today. Another thing that you often see in the Oasis that shows you the importance of the palm and other few plants that we're going to look at now are again the material culture they sell. So I will going to show you now. This object here is made with the trunk of the palm, the trunk, and so is this. So they dig it out and they make containers. While many of these containers here are made with something called bottle gourd, which is this, and is what we're going to see today. And then you have a little dish here made of palms. So a lot of the Tuareg material culture, and I believe ancient material culture, is very perishable in nature and is actually made of plants. So you can see they're very light as well, which means people can take with them going on the move, living on the move. So it already shows you that the little plants that they are there, the domesticated one, even if we don't think about as a place full of rich vegetation, it has a lot of plants that are used to produce containers to eat, to cook, to go through your daily life and stuff that you can take with you. One of the things that I loved, and I bought myself some of them, is that the Tuareg recycle stuff. So all the stuff you see here that they have sold is stuff that they have used. So there is a lot of recycling in there. Let me clear all the drawings so we can move on to the next slide. So on the left, you will see a bottle gourd. We're going to see it in a minute. And what you see on the right is like a little underplate, and is made with palm leaves, with leather, probably from goat. I think they use all the part of the animal, they eat it, and then it's very good. It's a very good way of life, actually, the nomadic one. And what you can see here is that around these palm leaves, there are some very colorful material. And I was really interested to see that, because in the past, they were colored using plants and minerals. Today, what you can probably not see from the picture is that the colors are due to the fact that the Tuareg that made this, you actually use plastic. So there is a lot of recycling. When on the left shows you what happened to the date palm when you leave it alone, and you can see that the palm doesn't actually completely drop all its leaves. So the oasis is an environment that is very much man-made. It's maintained by human. The palm, to be productive, needs a little bit of human help. But then I wanted to show you this as well, because it's not just about using the leaves for material culture, or for fuel, or for building material. The palm provides a very important thing, that is shade. And on the right, you can see a fig growing underneath a palm. Because, especially in summer, the amount of radiation that comes from the sun can be very detrimental to the growth of plant. And the palms and other trees, also you can see the soil is a little bit more humid, but reduces a little bit the evapotranspiration of plants and the loss of humidity from the soil, which is paramount for grasses to survive and other plants that actually serve to feed insects on which small mammals feed, on which larger mammal may feed on. So it's a chain of life that is very concentrated in some parts of the desert, and it stands entirely on the ability of plants to survive in there. Probably one of the most beautiful example I've seen of oasis where they're still living properly is in the pre-desertic, semi-desertic area of Ghadames, of the city of Ghadames, which is at the border between Tunisia and Algeria. And you can see here, this is an area that has been inhabited for many thousand years, nearly 4,000 years, and was conquered in the first BC by the Romans. So the Romans were there. And since then has been known as the Pearl of the Desert for its luxurious vegetation. This can give you an idea of how the Garamantes may have lived. And you can see there are these walls which are made of mud. And what they do, they have a double, they are used to separate properties, but they also prevent sand from the desert to enter into the gardens that they can cultivate. And it is incredibly green and luxurious. However, like from the Ubari Sensi, you can begin to see that the oasis health is not really looking good. Part of these villages are now being abandoned because a portion of the oasis is dying. This is partially due to the fact that people need water, so they're draining out of the water table the water that has been storing there for 40,000 years. And effectively, the water table is going deeper and deeper and deeper to the point that the palm root can no longer reach. Ghadames is one of the most beautiful places I have ever seen in my life. And it is a Warderitas site. And effectively is a complex structure of houses interlinked to each other with these sort of passages across. And what you normally have is that there are these corridors, and the houses there are structured in 3 different ways. The first floor is normally for storage. Then there is a like a ground floor for storage, a first floor where people live. And then the top, you will see, is the area where women used to live. And it is 2 cities, one underneath in the shade and one at the top. Because all the houses are connected, and I will show you in a minute. And the material culture is absolutely beautiful. They're of this very traditional basket, and the walls are also painted. So if you have a chance to visit there, go and have a look because it's extraordinary. And on the right, you can see the abandoned area of Ghadames Oasis, the Medina, the part of the center, and you can see the remaining palms here. People still live in can, and here you can see the amount of dates that you can get from one palm. Again, on the right, you see there are some edges, raised beds, with a square shape to the internal part of the wood. That was where a crop used to grow, and no longer, because it retains a little bit of water. And this is how it looks in many areas. And I think this is very convincing that actually there are some major issues in keeping this oasis green and functional. Now, if you remember a little bit, I will talk to you a little bit about some crops that are used and that are very traditionally African. So you can see the tropical element. The first one is the calabash, or bottle gourd, is Lagenaria siceriana, and this is thought archaeobotanically to be one of the oldest domesticated crop in the world, probably the most ancient, but we don't know much about it. And some people think that it's because people learn to use this bottle gourd as a container. That is how pottery developed, by modeling clay around it. And I want to provide you evidence of this, showing to you this area here. This is a Garamantian grave of 2,500 years old. And what you can see here is the impression in the ground. We know that from a part of the plant called phytolith, of this bottle gourd that was put probably with some dates or some food offering inside the grave of this Garamantian individual. So there is a record of these plants being present for many thousands of years. Here are 2 other very important crops. The first on the left is millet. And millet was domesticated in China around between 10,000 to 8,000 years ago, and then slowly made its way across the world. And for many years, it was used mainly as a fodder for birds, as grain for birds, but it's becoming more and more common in diet. It's a very healthy crop in the modern Western, let's say Europe, is becoming more popular. On the right, you have one of the most important African crops, which was domesticated, we think, probably the first form of domestication of the crops in Africa happened around 8,000 years ago, but the evidence is still very weak. So there is strong evidence for this crop to be domesticated in Ethiopia between 4,000 and 3,000 years ago. And that too is a plant extremely well adapted to the desert environment, and it requires much less water than sweet corn, for instance, that is more popular today. So these are basically the four key things that you would find more commonly domesticated within the Central Sahara. You would find sorghum, millet, sometimes wheat imported, but that grows there. The palms and the gourd are the four plants that I have found more often, both in my more modern travel there and in the archaeobotanical record. Okay, so then I have split the talk in two parts. So the next one, I will talk to you about the wild taxa. So shall we stop for a little bit? What do you think? Do you have a gap now?
That's a good idea.
It's up to you.
I
can carry on, or if people have a question now, I am quite happy to stop the talk and, and restart it. Whatever you do normally, whatever it's easy for you.
Okay. No one's used the chat, which, well, apart from me asking about Oasis.
I didn't see it, sorry, because I am looking at the full screen. I am not able to see the chat.
No, that's fine. There's, I just asked, is this what we call an oasis? It's, I guess most of us are totally out of our depth here. It's kind of a totally unfamiliar terrain, isn't it? And
okay, sorry for that. I assumed, yes, that's what we call oasis.
Yeah, I was wondering about, we saw a picture of the market. We didn't actually see any, I mean, people are nomadic, you said, I think, didn't you?
There is some seasonal stay in there. I think some of them were deliberately, at some point in the past 20, 30 years, I think Gaddafi made the move.
Yeah.
So there is nobody living there that I am aware of stably, but they do spend quite a little bit of time. I did not deliberately, there isn't anybody that you can see the face on the picture properly, but because I was told not to show people that could be recognized. Let me just, yeah, this one you mean, yeah?
I love that picture, and it actually looks quite windy.
It's always windy there. There is actually quite a lot of wind, yes. And these are the part of, they're like the scarves that the Tuareg wrap around their head. And you can buy them. I have one blue that I absolutely love.
Yeah.
Sandstorms.
Yeah, there are some sandstorms. I have seen such strong, I didn't have a picture to show you, unfortunately with me is in England, but there are sandstorms so strong that you can put a hand in front of your face and you cannot see it. Everything goes orange.
Mm.
And you need to it's very bad for your health, so you tend to go indoor when that happens because you breathe it in. Yeah. Okay.
Somebody has asked, what about the temperature? What would the temperature typically be?
Okay, sorry, I forgot to give you this. So I'll tell you this. I'll give you some information. Sorry, I was meant to actually. So desert environment are normally desert for the Sahara. You very rarely have any rain above 200 millimeters. And in the Central Sahara, I would say you are normally below 30 millimeters a year. In the season where I have been, normally the temperature range, so I'm talking about January to March, it ranges. In the night it can be quite chilly, but normally during the day it's between 20 to 35 degrees. That's the one I have experienced. But I am aware that in summer, during midday, can go around 45, 50 at time. I have been told by a Tuareg that they can cook an egg on a stone, if so hot it is, but that's mainly only in summer. What it is, it's extremely dry, so you do need to keep drinking. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Someone is asking about the color in the scarves that we were looking at. Are they dyed with natural color from plants?
Okay, I'm currently working on textile in Sodom. So what I would say is that the majority of the color I see here, they're probably dyed with chemical dyes. They're dyed by hand, by people, but I wouldn't think they are the traditional indigo dyes, or simply because these ones are mainly tourist, I would say. But deeper in the desert, you may find people that have traded indigo, for instance, or other material to dye. I am not aware of anything in the Oasis that could dye clothes normally. However, I have seen for colors, just as out of interest, because people are asking, I have seen people using, wetting the palm leaves or the grasses, and then passing them gently over a fire. And the material browns through the heat and through the deposition of smoke. So I have seen people coloring plant material used for houses and for pigments at times, using simply the smoke of the fire.
That Anita has requested that if you would like to make a donation to a charity to show your appreciation for her talk, then she would like to recommend a charity called Spana, S-P-A-N-A. I'll put it on the chat box. And they do tremendous work around the world helping working animals, donkeys, but other animals as well now. They've been going for a long while, since before the Second World War, I think. And one of my first travel talks I ever did was actually on behalf of Spana, years ago, 20 years ago. And I just had some photos and I did the commentary. I mean, I'm going to get in touch with them and see if they can perhaps do a talk for us. So that would be really good.
That would be lovely. And what I like them, then I will let you carry on, is that is one of the few charities in the world that really integrate their work with the education of very young people. Yeah. And teaching children to respect animals means teaching them to care about others, and is like such an extraordinary work with young people that is fantastic. Can you see it? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so to answer a little bit about the Oasis, which is effectively what we have seen so far. Okay, they are a combination of natural water, and also there is a role in many of them on people maintaining them. So the Oasis tend to be in area where the water table, either by natural pressure, sometimes in the Central Sahara is the ancient volcanic volcanic setting that are still underneath, that allowed the water from the deep water table that formed many thousands of years ago to be a little bit more superficial. What happens then is, once this water comes and collects, sometimes maybe through an unusual rainfall, sometimes there are little rivulets even in the Central Sahara, again in area more that have a memory of volcanism in their ground. What happens is that this water surfaces a little bit or get closer of the surface, at which point the palms are crucial, because their root can go very, very deep down, and they keep draining it up through the evaporation system. As they grow, they create a shade that reduce the loss of water and humidity of the ground in the area of shade, which allows then some smaller plants to grow underneath. as it builds, it creates an area that is also sort of self-maintaining. Because people have made use of these spaces in their movement, what they normally do, they are aware that there is some form of water table a little bit closer to the surface. So they can they have a time build wells and try to maintain these oases as well. So in many places, it's a very tricky balance between what is the natural availability of water, that is obviously a very complex system, and how much people actually use. At the moment, in many oases, like some in the Fezzan, the balance is tipping over. There is too much water taken by people. And I will give you this example. In the few years I worked in Libya, I saw a well in the central part of Germa being dug from 30 meters deep to 200 meters. So it's going deeper and deeper. At some point, the effort to take water up, it's too much. And that's when people stop, at which point effectively there is no more oasis there. But it is a tricky balance. I hope this is clear. Is it clear? Yeah? Okay.
Thank you for that, Anita. Thank you.
Okay, so just a reminder of the slides that I have shown you before. To remind you that basically these plants that we see have a very complex history of being the memory of events that brought in the Mediterranean element with rain mainly in winter and tropical elements with rain in the summer. And now we're going to have a look at what elements that are rare, that are endemic to the Sahara in the wild, and the one that comes from the tropical part of Africa, and those that migrated there from very ancient time from the Mediterranean area. Again, I have chosen four of the one that caught my attention, the one that probably you are more likely to encounter as well if you go there. And the first one is the tamarisk, which is effectively, it has very many species, but many tamarisk are found in North Africa and in the Mediterranean. This is a plant that is very important for the oasis, but also for area in the sand. Sometimes you find them only in the sand because it is extremely salt tolerant. So as the water disappears from the ground, it leaves concentrated salts. The tamarisk is able to survive in this condition. So it creates very good shades, it hosts insects, so it's a really nice tree to see. And they're absolutely beautiful in the wind. So and the origin of many of them is actually a sort of Mediterranean element. They're very familiar to me because in southern Italy, they're really, really common. An example of a more tropical elements that moved in the region and then got very well established, but then really likes some rain in the summer, is this plant here, Calotropis procera. And this is called Sodom Apple. And it's something that pops up if you Google it very often in very ancient text, because this plant has, first of all, very odd characteristic. When you look at it, the trunk is almost is very sharp. You can cut yourself, but it has almost mini knife of very, very hard bark, and it literally grows out of itself by creating cracks, and is extremely, extremely hard. And then it has leaves that are quite the opposite. They are very soft, sort of almost meaty. But what the plant has that you can see here, let me see if I can mark this, annotate. Draw. So what you can see here, these little dots, white dots, it's like a sort of milk that is all over inside the plant. This is toxic and is one of the most powerful, you can take one of the most powerful poisons that you can possibly be exposed in the desert, comes from these plants, to the point that very often they advise you not to touch your eyes if you have cut or sampled this plant, because it can blind you. But as hard as it is with the trunk and the leaf, I found this one of the most beautiful flowers I have ever seen. They're incredibly purple, and sort of the picture doesn't give justice. Actually, the color is almost glossy, and they start as little balls like these, little purple balls, and then they very slowly grow and open up. So if you see it, if you go there and see it, this is a very, very beautiful plant, and is a very good example of visitors, of plants that came from, let's say, the more tropical side of Africa. One of the plants that you may be lucky enough to see is this one. This comes from the region of Gat, which is at the border with Algeria. And this plant is called Saharan cypress, and it's now an endemic, but is a memory of the Mediterranean flora coming in many thousands of years ago. And it is present in two regions, in the form of Dupreziana in Algeria, which is a variety, and Dupreziana atlantica, which is the Morocco. This is considered one of the rarest, if not the rarest tree in the world. There are now only few hundred species surviving. But it is very interesting because in the area of Gat in Libya, archaeologists led by Professor Mauro Cremaschi, which was an Italian, my supervisor many, many years ago, what they did, they sampled the doors of Gat, of the little buildings in Gat where people used to live and still live today a little bit in the Oasis, and they identified the wood as coming from this tree. And some of the doors are made with wood that is 4,000 years old. The most recent one are 400 years old, meaning that probably this plant was in this area of Libya and this area of the desert up to very few hundred years ago. So their disappearance from some area is very, very recent. And it is a beautiful tree. It's sacred to many people, including the Tuareg, and it has medicinal power. The pulp of the trunk and the leaf can be made into a paste and put on the chest, because like many conifers, is very good for your respiratory system if you don't feel very well with it. So maybe very useful these days. And this is the plant that you will see in the bottle. It's actually this. This is a picture that zoom in from the top of the bottle, from the entrance of my desert bottle. And is a plant called Neurada procumbens. It's called desert rose, and you can see here as well. And it's very superficial, it's an annual. It can grow in many very different places. It's eaten by the camels, it's used as fodder, but it has one characteristic that I really like, and is a sort of symbol of the fight the plants put up to survive in the desert. Because this plant, like many desert plants, have adapted to survive in harsh environment, but they also have adapted to make the most out of unusual situations that may appear. So this plant has a mechanism for which, if there are animals around that they may be around, the presence of animals increases the ground of nitrogen and enrich the soil a little bit. That trigger a genetic reaction in the plant. So the spines that you see here, they normally are very small. They tend to grow very, very big, very long, so that the plant can actually attach to the coat of the animal and move with the animals, because the seeds that are contained in here, if they are attached to the animal, they can then go and potentially they are dropped where the animal is moving to find water, because plants don't have a choice. Once they root, they cannot move. But animals actively seek for shade, for more humid condition, and for water. Many desert plants have this mechanism of adapting their dispersal mechanism according to the condition on the ground. And I think this is a bit of a symbol of that, and it's one of the things that really fascinates me of the desert flora. For archaeobotanists, this is a huge issue, because in order to identify plants, unfortunately, we do need to build the reference material. And you tend to build it, very often you have one form of the seeds or the fruit of the plant, and sometimes they can have up to 5, depending by the condition. The form you see here is the one that the plant uses where there are no animals around, and it's the one that rolls well in the wind. So for me, it has been a huge complication to find out the many species that I may find in the archaeological record. I cannot identify them simply because they may today survive in a different dispersal mechanism, different form of seed or what they did several hundred or thousands of years ago. But it is, I think it's really, really interesting. The other slides that I wanted to show you is this one. This comes from a colleague of mine, which formerly at the University of Cambridge, now is at the CNR, the National Center for Research in Italy, is Giulio Lucarini. And with him, I worked a lot on stone tools scattered across the Sahara. And one of the things that the desert have, it has species that we can call the lost crops of Africa. I don't know if you know that the African continent has over 60 species of grass that are edible, for which there is a historical and archaeobotanical record of being effectively consumed many, many years ago by the population. They survive in condition of low humidity. Some of them can survive where effectively there is desert. I will show you one in a minute. Unfortunately, with the arrival of more I would say Mediterranean, but in general other crops from other continents, one of them being sweet corn, maize, wheat and barley, people began to abandon them, and many of them are now considered weeds. And this is a very big shame. And archaeobotanists and ethnobotanists are trying to sort of bring back to life this traditional heritage, because it could be used as soil protection and provide food. They naturally grow in the right condition, as you can see in this picture. They can grow in fields effectively. And what people do, they take baskets and they swing them, because unlike a domesticated crop, wild crop, they drop their seeds very easily. So a day of work like this is sufficient to feed a family of several people, sometimes up to 12 for a week. And they're very nutritious and they respect the environment a lot. One of the most common one in the desert is what the Tuareg call cram cram, and is this species here, Cenchrus biflorus, which is a close relative of pearl millet, which is another domesticated crop. As you can see here, this is adapted. You can see, let me highlight it a little bit, this picture. It shows you those spines that I was showing you in Neurada procumbens. These are the spines that the seeds use to attach the stems to animals so that they can effectively, either with the wind or animals, try to find a better location. In order for you to find the seed, you have to crush this involucre, and so it takes some work, and this is why today is considered a nonsense. But the Tuareg do still collect it in times where there is very little food around. Unfortunately, in many areas of the Sahel where this could be a food source, it gets treated like a weed and burned down, with the result that this is slowly disappearing from the North African flora. Now, so why I called it desert in a bottle? Because every time I look at what I am left of that place that I love so much, I can see in the bottle effectively what there is. There is the color of it, reminds me of the water table moving up and down, but also of the plants and people try to reach to the water. And then it has these lovely plants here that tell me of how much life fights and adapts to still there, and how much we still have to learn about this beautiful place. So I hope that you found the talk interesting, and that I hope I didn't forget. I have so much in my head to tell that sometimes I may forget something. But thank you very much for your attention, because my granddad actually lived in Libya, and I grew up hearing his memory, and it's just beautiful. Thank you.